All right, welcome back. So once again, we're shifting gears. We're turning our attention away from questions of personal identity, what makes you the same person over time. And we're going to begin addressing questions about knowledge. What is knowledge? How can you know anything? Are there good reasons to be a thoroughgoing skeptic about everything whatsoever? And if not, why not? All right. In a nutshell, those are the questions we're going to turn our attention to. A couple announcements. First of all, you've got a mid-semester break coming up, so next week there won't be tutes, there won't be lectures. Additionally, 2 weeks after that, so in about 3 weeks, I believe, you've got the essay coming due. So see the assignment as outlined on Moodle. You've got a selection of essays you can choose to write on, and we'll say a bit more about that as the time comes closer. But have a peek. Maybe you're interested in questions of epistemology. There's an epistemology question on there. There's a question on there for every subject we've covered. So wherever your interests fall with regard to course content, there should be something interesting for you to write on. Okay. All right. So epistemology. This is just the term philosophers use to refer to the study of knowledge. In dealing with epistemological questions, we're asking questions like this. What is knowledge? How do we get it? How can you know that you have it when you've got it? But it's not just questions of knowledge epistemologists are keen to address. There are also related questions about rationality. We want to know about when is a belief rational? What can make a belief rational? How can you know that you have a rational belief when you've got one? And then, obviously, there are related issues. If you're going to talk about what a rational belief is, you've got to say a few words about what is a belief. So this also falls within the purview of epistemology, as well as philosophy of mind. So these are some questions we want to answer. And we'll begin addressing them now. All right. So what's the common sense perspective on these two questions? What do we know, and how do we know? Well, the common sense perspective is one that'll be quite unsurprising to you. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be able to call it the common sense perspective. All right. So with regard to the question, what do we know? The common sense point of view, the point of view of any ordinary person, is going to be, well, we know quite a bit. Right? We certainly don't know everything, and we certainly think we know some things that we don't actually know. But in a wide range of cases, we have knowledge. So we know some things in the following categories. Right? We know things about our immediate environment. Right? You know that you're in a room right now. You know that this is a classroom. You know that you're hearing somebody speak. You know things about yourself, right? You know that you seem to hear someone speaking. You know that you're feeling anxious about some upcoming assignment, or you're feeling relieved now that this last assignment's done. You know what your fears are. You know what your hopes are. There's all kinds of things you know about how things are with you on the inside. Common sense facts about the world. Dark clouds with thunder are a good indicator of rain, that rain is coming. You know, it's going to be warmer if the sun's out than if it's not. Scientific facts, right? That water is H2O. You know things about the mental states of others, right? So you know, for example, that the person sitting next to you is not currently in blindingly agonizing pain. If they were, they'd be behaving quite differently than they are now. All our attention would be on them and not on this epistemology lecture. Right? You know things about the mental states of others. You know things about the past, right? You know that you were born at a specific point in time. You know that you began at Monash at a specific point in time. You know that you walked in here not all that long ago. We could say many more things, right? We know things about math. We know conceptual truths like all bachelors are unmarried. We know some things about morality, right? That it's morally wrong to take an infant and then torture it as long as humanly possible, just for fun. We know things about the future, right? So the common sense point of view says, well, in a wide range of cases, we have knowledge. Now, people are going to dispute what's known in each kind of category, but rarely are you going to encounter someone who says, we don't know anything in that category, right? So this is part of the common sense point of view. What do we know? A lot about a lot of different kinds of things. Religion. All right. Getting disputes. All right, so how do we know things? Well, this is also part of the common sense point of view. Our primary sources of knowledge include perceptual experiences, right? Part of what explains how you know that you're in a room, that someone's speaking, and so on, about this immediate environment is through your perceptual experiences that inform you of what this environment is like. So what you hear, what you see, if you'd like, what you might taste, what you can touch, and so on. Memory is also a source of knowledge, right? We remember things, and so are in a position to know what we remember. So if you have a perceptual experience, right, as of, just think about what you had for breakfast this morning, right? Part of what explains your knowledge now of what you had for breakfast earlier this morning is the fact that you remember the particular perceptual experiences you had this morning when having breakfast. Introspective experiences. Introspection, this has to do with looking inward on your own mental life. So it's through introspection that you're aware that you're not currently in blindingly agonizing pain. It's through introspection that you're aware that you seem to see things. It's through introspection that you're aware of what your hopes are, what your fears are. When you think, I have a question, and you realize, oh, I've got a question, it's through introspection that you're aware. It's not a well-defined process. This is just a term we throw at this kind of category of awareness with regard to ourselves. It's a certain privileged category because you can only be introspectively aware of your own mental life and not of anybody else's. I know how things are for me on the inside right now, but I don't know how they are on the inside for you in that same way. Right? I'm immediately aware of the fact that I'm not in pain. I'm immediately aware of the fact that I seem to see people. I'm immediately aware of the fact that my mouth is a little bit dry. I'm going to have a bit of water, or I want to have a bit of water. But I can't be in that same way aware of any of those things with regard to you. Here's a different one, rational insight or reason. So it's through reason or rational insight or rational intuition that we know a variety of things. So for example, that nothing can both exist and not exist at the same time. Right? You can't see that that's true with your eyes. You can't hear that that's true with your ears. You can't remember that that is true. Introspection doesn't reveal that it's true. Introspection can reveal to you the thought that it seems to you to be true. But reason is something different. Right? It informs of things not about our own internal experiences. And these are not propositions about our own internal experiences. So another example, that the surface area of an object cannot be completely covered by two distinct colors. Right? You can't have a ball, right, that's completely red on the surface and completely green at the same time in exactly the same sense. If you reflect on that, that just seems true, right? If you had to mark true or false on an exam, you'd mark true. It seemed quite clearly true to you. But again, you can't explain its truth by appeal to your senses, by appeal to perceptual experiences, by appeal to memory, and so on. There are a variety of examples that can be given. There's another way in which we know things, reasoning and arguments. Right, we've spent a lot of time this semester addressing arguments for sometimes surprising conclusions. And reasoning, or argument construction, is a way of gaining knowledge. And lastly, testimony is also a way of gaining knowledge. When scientists perform experiments and they report their results to us, we learn things via their testimony, right? We didn't perform the experiments. I'm wondering about the color, suppose, of your childhood home's front door. You tell me, right? And by your testimony, I'm in a position to know what your childhood home's front door color was. Because you know, and by testimony, you transfer that knowledge to me. A lot of what we know, we gain by way of testimony. All right, this is just a very there's a whole lot more to say about each of these. But I just want to sort of draw your attention to them, and that the common sense point of view says, this is how we know things. It's through these ways. These are our fundamental ways of gaining knowledge of the world. If there's any other way of gaining knowledge of the world, it's through these things. So, for example, if you do science, where you perform experiments, notice that's not a new way of learning that should be put on this list, right? That's not a fundamental way of gaining knowledge about the world. Because and you've all sat through science classes and have had to perform minor experiments, right? What you do is you use your eyes, right? And you construct experiments on the basis of certain well-defined parameters, and you get your conclusions, and you're relying on reasoning, right? Maybe you're relying on other things here. So for example, with regard to the setup of the experiment, you rely on your memory of the setup, right? So it's not clear that science gives us anything in addition to what we have here, right? By way of fundamental ways of accessing our world. They introduce new methods and new ways of using these things, but at the ground level, we're using these things. Questions about these? All right. All right, so this is just part of common sense. It's not surprising that you might not have questions, because they should all be kind of familiar. All right. But we want to know about knowledge, right? So those are ways in which we form beliefs, and the common sense point of view says these aren't just ways we form beliefs, they're ways we know. So when is a way of forming beliefs, like the way in which you form beliefs about your immediate environment, right? You look around, and you trust your perceptual experience that things are as they seem. Common sense point of view says you come by knowledge in that way. But we want to know when is the exercise of these methods or processes of forming beliefs such that we get knowledge from them. Well, to answer that effectively, you got to pause and answer this question. What's knowledge to begin with? What is this thing we're inquiring about? All right. Okay. First of all, there are different senses of knowledge, right? So when you call to mind the different sentences in which the term knowledge can occur, there's going to be some distinct ones. So first off, you hear people say things like this all the time. I know so-and-so. Right? They're saying that they have knowledge with regard to an object. But people also say things like this. So one might say, I know Conan O'Brien. Another might say that Conan O'Brien knows how to tell jokes. And one might also say that he knows that some people don't watch his show. These are three different senses of knowledge. The first sense is knowledge, what's called knowledge by acquaintance. Right? When you talk about knowing someone or seeing something, ordinarily what we're talking about is a relation you stand in to an object. The person, the tree, the whatever. There's know-how, so this has to do with skills, right? You know how to ride a bike, you know how to throw a football, you know how to do all sorts of things. And then what is of special interest for us is propositional knowledge, knowledge of facts. So a lot of the questions about knowledge that we have to do with this, knowledge of facts, propositional knowledge. All right. So what's propositional knowledge? Right, well, it has to do with knowing things like Lincoln was a president of the United States, that water is H2O, that Monash is not in Canada. It's the kind of knowledge that you get when you read a textbook, when you read a journal that communicates information accurately. It's hopefully what you get when you read a good philosophy text, a little bit of knowledge. Propositional knowledge, so knowledge of facts, knowledge of statements. Right. One of the reasons we're concerned with propositional knowledge is because this is how we, right, so what we believe has to do with our perspective on the world, right? So we believe that the sun's risen often in the past, that it'll continue to rise on into the future, at least for a while. You know that eventually you'll stop attending philosophy lectures. You know all kinds of things, or at least you take yourself to. These are things that you also believe. And whenever we're reporting on these kinds of things, knowing that this is so, knowing that such and so is true, it's propositional knowledge that's at issue. Okay. Any questions about the different kinds of knowledge? All right, propositional knowledge. All right, so what's this? All right. Consider this case. All right, so our question is, what is propositional knowledge? Right, we take ourselves to have it with regard to a wide variety of things. Or we take ourselves to know that we'll eventually leave this classroom. We take ourselves to know that we're in a classroom. What do we mean when we say we know that these things are so? Well, you might think it's belief plays a role here, right? So here's a case. Kima has no beliefs about waterboarding. She's never heard of it before. And if asked, she'd suspect it's a kind of water sport. As it happens, waterboarding is a non-athletic form of torture that is quite horrible to experience. All right. Does Kima know that waterboarding is horrible? Right. Do you have any inclination to think that the answer to this question should be yes? Yeah, right? A lot of you are nodding your heads no. Why not? Well, we don't want to explain the fact that she doesn't have knowledge by the fact that she doesn't have knowledge. Yeah. Because I suppose her belief is that some kind of force or she has no belief about it. Yeah. So we can explain her absence of knowledge in terms of absence of belief. Right? She has no beliefs about this. And that seems to explain why she has no knowledge. Right? It doesn't make great sense to think that she can have knowledge of waterboarding when she has no beliefs about waterboarding whatsoever. It's like claiming that you know things about the surface of Alpha Centauri when you have no beliefs about Alpha Centauri. So here's the conjecture, that in order to know something, you have to believe it. It makes, put differently, this should just sound really odd. I know that I'm in a classroom, but I don't believe it. Or I know that Alpha Centauri is a bit warm, but I have no beliefs about Alpha Centauri. Right? That should sound really odd to your ears, like talking about married bachelors. Right? So evidence for the idea that belief is a condition on knowledge. Right? You don't know that something's the case unless you believe that something's the case. All right, well, here's the challenge. Here's something that shouldn't sound too unfamiliar, right? I just said a moment ago, it should sound weird to say, I believe, or rather, I know that something's true, but I don't believe it. Well, here's a case. You can easily imagine someone saying, I know Obama won the election, I just don't believe it. Or maybe this is a bit outdated. Heaven forbid, right? Trump wins. Someone might say. or hold on. Let me change this. Yeah. So Trump wins. You say, I know he won. I just can't believe it. That doesn't sound quite so odd, right? Is this a challenge to the belief condition? Yeah. Yeah, very good. We got to be careful with. We always got to ask these two questions: what does a sentence mean, and what is a person expressing with their use of a sentence? And sometimes these things can come apart. And this seems to be just one of those instances. When someone says, "I know so and so won, but I don't believe it," they don't really mean they don't believe it. They mean, "I'm quite surprised," right? Or they're using believe in some other kind of sense. Right? This seems to be, right, so just pause, appreciate the explanation. Feels like this is a pretty good way of accommodating statements like this that would superficially seem to pose a problem for the belief condition on knowledge. Any pushback? You feel like you have any other, can you think of any other cases where someone might be inclined to say, I have knowledge but no beliefs? So I know that God exists, but I don't believe that God exists? Okay. I guess we can imagine someone saying that. Is there a good explanation for how what they're saying could be true, even though belief seems related to knowledge? Well, you might think that one thing a person might mean in saying that is they might know that God exists, or take themselves to know anyway, but they're not committed to it. They don't want to live like they're, in saying they don't believe it, they're expressing a non-commitment to the world being such that God's around. So the question is, do you feel like that's adequate? I kind of feel like that's adequate, but maybe I've been steeped in this for too long. Maybe I've spent too much time with the philosophers. But that is just how you put pressure. And that's just what the philosopher is going to say is there's an alternative way of understanding this kind of language that helps us make sense of the connection between belief and knowledge and the way in which people sometimes use sentences that would seem to go contrary to that. So, right, where's the knowledge claim in that? Right, so that doesn't pose a problem for the claim that belief is a necessary condition for knowledge, because you've just given a case where there's belief without knowledge. We're not claiming that knowledge is a necessary condition for belief. We can clearly believe things we don't know. It's the converse we care about, whether or not you can know something and fail to believe it. All right, so we haven't talked much about the nature of belief, but we were able to ask questions effectively because you're all familiar with the fact that you have beliefs. So a few words on belief, right? Belief is a representational mental state, right? It's a psychological state. It's a psychological state that represents the world as being a certain way. When you believe something, when you believe that water is H2O, you represent the world as being such that there's an identity relation between water and H2O. When you believe that you're in a classroom, you represent the world as being such that you're in a classroom. Right? It's a kind of mental map of the world. Right? It represents the world as having certain characteristics. And what a belief represents has to do with what its content represents. So beliefs always you don't believe in you don't just believe. Right? There's no just believing. There's always a content associated with the belief. You believe that you're in a room. You believe that water is H2O. You believe that, just pick the proposition. You believe that Obama is the President of the United States. You believe that Australia is better today than it was, I don't know, whenever, right? Believing that, right? There's always a content to the belief. And what the belief represents is whatever the content represents. And since beliefs have content, beliefs can be true or false, right? If the content misrepresents the world, then the belief is false. If the content accurately represents the world, then the belief is true. So the belief inherits the truth value of its content. If water is not H2O, then your belief that water is H2O is false. And it's false because water is not H2O. Another fact about belief that's helpful to keep in mind is that it comes in degrees. There are some things you believe more strongly than others. I take it that you're very confident that you're presently sitting down. I bet you're somewhat less confident that that the cereal is where you remember placing it this morning. Right? You can have a pretty clear memory of that, but sometimes people move things. Sometimes you misremember. I mean, you eat cereal every day. Sometimes memories kind of blur together, and right. So still, you might believe that the cereal is on a given shelf in a certain location, but you're not as confident of that as you're confident in the claim you're now sitting. Right? And a lot of our beliefs we can order in this kind of way. Among them, some we believe more strongly than others. Any questions about belief or the belief condition? Yeah. They just have a false belief? Yeah. So if you believe I have 15 watches on my arm, it's going to be a false belief because there's just one, right? Right. So that has to do with this bit about the truth value, number 3, a belief being false if the content that is a part of the belief is false. Can you have knowledge of things that aren't so? Well, let's consider a case. Jack's grown up around flat earthers. Now, these are people who believe the earth is flat. They have arguments for their view, and Jack's come to believe that the earth is flat. And so imagine Jack's unfortunate position. He's just grown up around these people, right? All he knows is what these people believe about the world. And just like you inherit your beliefs, a lot of your beliefs about the world from the society in which you grew up, Jack just grew up around these folks. He takes himself, obviously, to know that the earth is flat. But let's ask this question. Does he actually know that the earth is flat? And I see a lot of you nodding your heads. No, he doesn't have knowledge. And this is supposed to be explained by the fact that knowledge is importantly related to truth. Knowledge is importantly related to truth. You can't know things that aren't so. You can think you know things that aren't so. Like Jack. Jack thinks he knows the earth is flat. But Jack can think he knows and not know. And this is just what's predicted if you say truth is a necessary condition on knowledge. All right. So knowledge requires belief. You can't know things unless you believe them. And again, we're always talking about propositional knowledge. We're talking about knowledge here. And you can't know things that aren't true. Right? So if something's false, you don't know it. So here's the way to put pressure on this kind of claim. Can you think of a case where someone has knowledge, but what they believe is false? All right. Here's a possible case. You can imagine someone saying, I just knew that McCain would win the election, but he didn't. Well, this seems to be put a little pressure. Is there any alternative explanation for why someone might say something like this? Or do you think it's, no, in the strict literal sense, this person actually knew McCain would win, even though McCain didn't win? Yeah, yeah. Certainly they're communicating that they believed, right? And again, it seems related to confidence, right? A person was just really confident. They thought they knew, but they didn't actually know. Maybe they're also communicating surprise in saying this. But just because people say things which on the surface seem to indicate that knowledge can come apart from truth doesn't mean that they actually are taking knowledge to come apart from truth. Right? We can do things with words or sentences that don't require those sentences to be strictly, literally true. And that's how philosophers respond to these kinds of cases. Can you think of any other cases that might worry you about this? Cases where you feel inclined to think, no, that person has knowledge even though what they believe isn't actually true? All right. So here's where we're at. We've got reason to think knowledge is importantly connected to truth and belief. Is that all there is to knowing? Having true belief, right? They're necessary, right? We don't know without having true belief. But are they sufficient? That is every time you have a true belief, the time at which you have knowledge. Right. Let's consider a case. All right. Omar believes Obama will be reelected, but he only believes it because his horoscope says so. As it happens, Obama is reelected. All right? So Omar has a true belief. My question for you, are you inclined to think that Omar has knowledge? Yeah, a lot of you are saying no. What's missing here? What's wrong? What's that?
It's a coincidence.
All right, good. It's a coincidence. Yeah, there's this. He gets lucky, and he gets lucky because he's believing on the basis of something that gives him no justification at all. Right? Horoscopes are not a source of evidence. They're not reliably connected to the truth. They don't provide us with good reasons for belief. And so, there's a really strong intuition in favor of the idea that if you know something, it's not just the case that you have a true belief. It's really easy to have true beliefs. What differentiates knowledge from true, right? If you believe everything, right? If you believe that you're in a room and you believe you're not in a room, if you believe everything and it's contradictory, right? You're going to end up with a true belief, right? Because things are either one way or the other. If you believe your hair is 5 inches long, and if you also believe that it's not 5 inches long, right? You're bound to have a true belief because it's either 5 inches long or it's not. If you believe everything, you're going to end up with a ton of true beliefs, right? But you're not going to end up with a lot of knowledge, right? Because just believing everything is just going to get you a lot of true beliefs, but only luckily. You don't have justification for all the beliefs that you have in that kind of case. So the thought is justification is an important element in knowing. You have to have good reasons for believing what you do. Right, and this is where thoughts about the common sense perspective kick back in. Right, what makes perception, according to the common sense perspective, a way of knowing? What makes memory, according to the common sense perspective, a way of knowing? What makes testimony a way of knowing? What makes reason? Right, is that all these things generate justification. They afford you good reasons for believing. Right, the fact that it seems like there's a projection on the wall is a good reason to believe that there's a projection on the wall. Right? The fact that you can see and feel that you're in a padded seat is a good reason to believe that you're in a padded seat. Right? Perceptual experiences afford you reasons for belief, justification. Well, here's a question. Suppose you interview an expert on whether bananas or blood oranges are a better source of potassium. Suppose the expert says bananas are better, and he lists his reasons, a few of which you understand, right? You're not a nutritionist. And so when he begins giving you the information, right, you kind of glaze over because it's just all mumbo jumbo to you. Do you have justification to believe that bananas are a better source of potassium? Why don't you turn to the person next to you? Right? All right, what do you think? Show of hands, do you have justification to believe that bananas are better? So yes, if raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Lots of you say yes. Does it matter that you aren't aware of the reasons for this? Why do you say yes, even if you don't understand his reasons? Yeah, right. You can know that there are good reasons, even if you don't understand what those reasons are. This is our fate in like the contemporary world. Knowledge has become too detailed, too precise. We can't know everything. We can't understand what the physicists are doing, but we can understand some of the conclusions they summarize for us. The fact that we know that they're experts, and we know that they have good reasons because they're experts, that gives us reason, right? We don't have the same reasons they have, right? They have different. They understand the actual. They're not relying on testimony from other experts, right? They understand the reasons for their views. We don't understand that, but we know that they're experts, and we know that there are reasons, and so that gives us a different kind of reason. All right. Suppose you later encounter another expert. They say blood oranges are better, right? Not bananas, and they list their reasons, and again, it's all blah 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 to you. Do you now have justification to believe blood oranges are better? So you got expert A says bananas are better. Expert B says blood oranges are better. Do you now have justification to believe blood oranges are better? What do you think? A lot of you are saying no. Why? Why no? You've got
Do you have to give one expert precedence?
well, it seems like to say yes, you would have to give precedent.
Yes.
You have to have a reason for that, right? Yeah, good. So this is a case in which it seems clear that no, you don't have justification to take one stance or the other, right? Because you've got two expert voices pointing you in two different directions, and you don't understand their reasons, right? You can't sort of deliberate about who gave better reasons. It's all blah, blah, blah to you. Okay. So when this happens, right, so you've gone from the initial case where you had justification to believe bananas are better. You got more evidence, right? This defeated your justification, right? This is just a fact about justification. It can be defeated. It can be removed by the addition of further evidence. All right, so what should you believe? Well, I think if we pause for a moment, we'd see that the intuitive answer is that, well, we should suspend belief. We should withhold belief. We shouldn't believe either. Right, we've got some reason to believe both from different experts, but both can't be true. Right? Either one's better or the other is. or they're equal, right? But you don't have any information with regard to that. Okay. Some properties of justification. Okay. So first of all, justification is fallible. Just because an expert says there's fantastic evidence for P, doesn't mean P is true. Right. You can do your math homework, work really hard, triple check your work, and still get the wrong answer. But you've got great reason for giving the answer you've given. Right, justification is fallible. Justification comes in degrees. Right, suppose that the first expert says bananas are better, and then the second expert says the same thing. Well, now you've got more reason than you had initially. So your justification's gone up. So you can have more or less justification to believe something. As we just saw, justification can be defeated. It can be removed, can be compromised. And you can have some reason, some justification for believing, even if you don't have enough. Right? The fact that expert A says one thing gives you a little bit of reason to believe that. The fact that expert B says something else gives you a little bit of reason to believe that. But you don't have sufficient reason to believe anything. Right? You don't have sufficient justification to form a belief. Right? They neutralize each other. Any questions about justification? All right. So here's where we end up. All right, this is what's widely regarded as the traditional historical account of knowledge, that if you just march back in philosophy pre-1960, any account of knowledge is going to look a whole lot like this. It's going to connect knowledge to true belief plus having adequate reason, that is, justification. Knowledge is, in other words, justified true belief. All right? So what we're making here is a conceptual claim. It's like wondering, what is a bachelor? Well, it's an unmarried adult male who's eligible for marriage, something like that. The concept bachelor is connected to all those things. And you've got a bachelor in the room when you've got someone who has all those properties in the room. You've got knowledge when you've got someone who has a true belief that's justified. That's the claim here. And you never have a knower where you have someone who lacks a justified true belief. Any questions about this account? Any elements of the account? Questions about truth or justification or belief? All right. There's something inside the account that needs to be highlighted. There's an assumption you're making that you don't know that you're making. Okay. One more element. Imagine this scenario. Imagine two jurors, Jenna and Natalie, deliberating about the case of Mr. Mansour. Both jurors have paid close attention throughout the trial. As a result, both have reason to believe that Mansour is guilty. Each juror goes on to form the belief that Mansour is guilty, which in fact he is. Right? So they have true beliefs with reason. Natalie believes he's guilty because of the evidence. Right? She saw the evidence and she formed her belief in response. Jenna believes he's guilty because he looks suspicious. Okay. All right, does Jenna know that Mansour is guilty? He's got a belief, he's got a true belief, and he's got great reason for his belief. Right? He's, or I shouldn't say he, who is this? Jenna. Jenna's paid careful attention throughout the trial. Like, she's given the trial her utmost attention. She knows all the reasons that have been given in favor of thinking Mansour was guilty. So she's got great reason for believing what she believes. Right? So she's got a justified true belief. So according to the traditional account, she has knowledge. Do you have any qualms with that? What's the qualm? No, there's no false belief need to be based on. This isn't a Gettier case. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You could say that him making suspicion is not a good reason to base your beliefs on.
Yeah, good. She's not forming her belief in the right kind of way. She's got great reason for holding the belief she holds, but she's not responding to her reasons in the right kind of way. Right? She's not believing he's guilty for the reasons that indicate he is guilty. All right. All right, so the general issue is this. You can have terrific evidence to think something's true. You can also believe it's true. It can also be true. But if you don't believe it for that reason, you don't have knowledge. Right? You just got lucky. Right? The fact that your belief happens to be true and just true is, let's just say a matter of luck. Right? So this point is not like the Gettier points. This point about belief and how it has to be responsive to the right kinds of reasons is implicit in the justified true belief account. It's something that everyone just sort of naturally takes for granted. It's something that you yourself took for granted when thinking about the role justification plays in having knowledge. You've got to have justification to have knowledge. And what we were assuming when we were thinking about cases where people have justification is that people are responding to that justification in the right kind of way. Right? They're just not believing willy-nilly and getting lucky that they have evidence that also supports what they end up believing. They're actually forming their beliefs in response to their evidence or in response to their reasons. And in order to have knowledge, you have to be believing in that kind of way. All right. So we still say knowledge is justified true belief, but to say that a belief's justified, we're assuming two things. That you've got good reason for believing what you do, and that you're basing your belief on those good reasons. All right, so this is what you do. When you're curious about whether or not something's true, and you go to the encyclopedia or the reliable website, whatever, and you see what it says, and then you believe what it says because you know that this is a reliable source. By responding to that reliable source, with belief, you're basing your belief on your good reason. You're believing it for a good reason. Okay. So here's the question. All right, we've thought about knowledge. We've very easily got to the traditional view that says knowledge is justified true belief. This is a pretty compelling view. Right? It seems to explain a whole lot. What's utterly shocking and what rocked the philosophical community in the 1960s was that Edmund Gettier proposed a variety of cases where it seems like you can have justified true belief and yet not have knowledge. Cases where you have great reason for believing something, you believe it for that reason, your belief turns out to be true, and yet you don't have knowledge. All right, so this is what we're going to turn our attention to next time. Counterexamples to this account. Right? Reasons to think that this account doesn't quite say all that needs to be said about knowledge. So, see you guys next time. The counterexamples are fascinating. It'll be a good time.